decisions taken by the Lebanese executive to strengthen the sovereignty of Lebanon and its openness to engage in direct discussions with Israel. This is a historic opportunity that France would invite them to take without delay to achieve a lasting solution to this conflict in the interest of all parties. France is ready to facilitate these discussions in close collaboration with its partners. It's with this in mind that the French Minister of Foreign Affairs a few days ago went to Beirut and Jerusalem. But to achieve this solution, there are several conditions: the respect for the UN, the respect for UNIFIL staff and personnel, the respect for international law, including international humanitarian law and civilian people, and also the cessation of hostilities as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also wish to thank USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Chiari for their briefings. Colleagues, we gather today at a moment of profound sorrow and grave concern as the ongoing conflagration in Lebanon has not spared UNIFIL's blue helmets. Fully echoing the Secretary General's latest statement, Greece strongly condemns the recent killing of 3 Indonesian UNIFIL peacekeepers amidst heavy firing. We express our condolences to the families of the fallen peacekeepers and to our Indonesian colleagues. The incident is tragically added to a series of violent attacks against UN personnel, including the injuring of Ghanaian blue helmets earlier this month and a Polish one a couple of days ago. Attacks against UN personnel are unacceptable. They constitute grave violations of international humanitarian law and of UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and must immediately stop. The safety and security of peacekeepers is non-negotiable. We call for a thorough investigation and accountability for this incident. Mr. President, Lebanon continues to pay the price of a conflict it neither chose nor can afford. We strongly condemn once again Hezbollah's attacks in support of the Iranian regime against Israel, which triggered a dangerous round of regional escalation. These attacks severely undermine the Lebanese government's efforts to restore its exclusive control over arms across the country. Restoring the state monopoly over arms throughout the country is an essential prerequisite for sustainable peace and security for Lebanon, Israel, and the region. In this regard, we commend the historic and courageous decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to ban Hezbollah's military activities. This is a step in the right direction, demonstrating the Lebanese government's willingness to deal with outstanding issues and deserves the full support of the international community. Lebanon should not stand alone. Greece fully supports the efforts of President Aoun and of the Lebanese government to forge strong state institutions. Empowering the LAF is essential for ensuring Lebanese sovereignty. Greece already bilaterally assists Lebanon, including the LAF, and we stand ready to participate in the international conference in Paris as soon as conditions allow. We also recognize Israel's right to self-defense. Communities in northern Israel have suffered terribly due to Hezbollah's attacks since October 2023. However, any further escalation must be avoided. We call for a maximum restraint and we are opposed to protracted ground operations. The expansion of Israel's military operations into Beirut and across Lebanon's territory aggravates the already fragile security situation. Greece reaffirms its support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence of Lebanon. Full respect for Resolution 1701 and the November 2024 ceasefire agreement is essential in this regard. Mr. President, civilians are bearing the heaviest burden of this crisis. More than 1 million people have been displaced, many lives have perished, and thousands have been severely injured. The risk of broader regional destabilization, including of additional refugee flows, is growing. Civilian infrastructure, including airports, ports, and bridges across the country, do not constitute legitimate targets. Journalists, humanitarian, and health care workers must be protected at all times and in all circumstances. We also express our condolences to the families of the victims and our solidarity to those impacted by this war. International humanitarian law must be upheld by all parties, everywhere and at all times. Standing in full solidarity with the Lebanese people, Greece immediately responded to OCHA's flash appeal, allocating a substantial financial contribution. We are also finalizing our contribution to strengthening Lebanon's health sector. At the same time, the tireless efforts of humanitarian actors on the ground, including UN agencies in UNRWA, cannot be overlooked. Their work under extremely difficult and dangerous conditions is indispensable as it is commendable. Mr. President, any further escalation risks the lives of civilians who have not opted for this conflict. It endangers UN personnel who are striving to uphold peace at the risk of their own safety. And it severely undermines Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence, which we strive to preserve. We commend the willingness of the Lebanese leadership to pursue direct political negotiations with Israel. This is a moment for responsibility and de-escalation. Lebanon deserves a future of peace, security, and dignity, free from external interference and internal division. Greece will stand by its side in that effort. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Mr. President, allow me to begin by thanking you for convening this meeting on such a short notice. And I also thank France and Indonesia for requesting this meeting in light of UNIFIL casualties and the grave and escalatory situation in Lebanon. I thank USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Carey for their briefings. Latvia strongly condemned the attacks on UNIFIL, resulting in the death of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers and injuries to several other peacekeepers. And we express our deepest condolences to the Republic of Indonesia. Our thoughts are with the injured and the loved ones of the deceased. We call for a robust and timely investigation to determine the perpetrators of the attacks. We call for the accountability of these blatant violations of international humanitarian law. The safety and security of UN personnel and property is not optional. It must be respected by all sides at all times. Deliberate attacks on peacekeepers are grave violations of international humanitarian law and may constitute war crimes. We call upon all members of this Council to continue stressing the crucial importance of upholding commitments agreed in Security Council Resolutions 2518 and 2730. We commend the exceptional service of UNIFIL as it continues to implement its mandate under Resolution 1701 and providing assistance to the local population even in the direst of circumstances. All essential personnel, including those from my own country, are still on duty in the midst of hostilities. The threats to safety and security of UNIFIL peacekeepers have clearly reached a threshold which demands further reflection by the UN and the mission's leadership on how to prevent further casualties while continuing to implement its mandate. The latest incidents demonstrate the current military escalation in Lebanon has serious consequences for all: the civilian populations, the humanitarian personnel, and for UN peacekeepers. Even clearly recognizable UN peacekeepers become targets when the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution are discarded. The ongoing conflict undermines the stability in the region and the global security. We express concern about the humanitarian crisis caused by mass displacement in Lebanon and inflow into Syria. Over 1 million people forcibly displaced, of which 370,000 are children, 3,700 injured, over 1,200 deaths. Hezbollah has dragged the people of Lebanon into a war they have no part in. Iran must stop enabling Hezbollah's military activities and armed hostilities. Hezbollah must immediately stop all aggressive actions against Israel and disarm. The Lebanese government has clearly taken a stand against the malign influence of Hezbollah and Iran in their country. We commend the Lebanese government's decision of 2nd of March to declare all Hezbollah military and security activities illegal in the whole territory of Lebanon. We also welcome the political commitment of the Lebanese government to extend its authorities throughout the country and the implementation of the disarmament plan. Continued international support in these efforts remains essential. We call upon Israel to abstain from attacks against civilian infrastructure and heavily populated areas, and to respect the Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity. All parties must respect international law, including international humanitarian law, and ensure the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. Mr. President, the hostilities around the Blue Line continue to escalate, claiming the lives of civilians and UNIFIL peacekeepers with increasing frequency. International humanitarian law is being ignored. We call on all parties to the conflict to fully respect the Security Council Resolution 1701, de-escalate and work towards peace. For generations, the Lebanese people have suffered from armed conflict. Lebanon, yet again, finds itself on the brink, and we continue to stand by Lebanon and its people. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Khalid Kyari for the briefings that shed light on various dimensions of this situation. Pakistan condemns in the strongest possible terms the killing of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers serving under the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon in separate attacks. This tragic and deeply disturbing incident strikes at the very heart of international law, UN peacekeeping, and the international community's collective commitment to the maintenance of international peace and security. But we know that these are not isolated incidents, but part of a disturbing pattern of attacks on UNIFIL. As USG Lacroix also noted, UNIFIL has been subjected to a persistent aggressive behavior and restrictions on freedom of oppression. The Council must not allow such violence against peacekeepers to become normalized. These missions are mandated by the Security Council, and their protection is the Council's foremost responsibility. As one of the largest troop contributing countries, Pakistan, having lost 182 peacekeepers in the line of duty, we share this profound sense of loss. We stand in full solidarity with the government and people of Indonesia, as well as with the families of the fallen peacekeepers, whose sacrifice reflects the immense risks undertaken in service of international peace and security. And we wish full and speedy recovery to the injured peacekeepers. President, attacks against peacekeepers are unacceptable and may constitute war crimes under international law. UN personnel are impartial agents of peace. Targeting them is a grave violation that undermines international humanitarian law. The failure to ensure the safety of UN personnel undermines the credibility of this Council of Peacekeeping, international law, and the collective commitment of the international community to maintain peace and protect civilians. In this regard, accountability is essential. Those responsible must be brought to justice. Pakistan calls for a prompt, thorough, transparent, and impartial investigation to establish the facts. The safety and security of peacekeepers and UN premises must be fully ensured at all times, in full accordance with international law. Pakistan deeply appreciates the vital role of UNIFIL in carrying out its mandate in a complex and high-risk environment while maintaining peace and stability along the Blue Line. Full freedom of movement of its personnel must be guaranteed. Recent artillery shelling, airstrikes, and drone attacks have increased hostile incidents against UNIFIL peacekeepers in clear violation of international law. This incident must also be viewed within the broader context. Israel's continued military actions in southern Lebanon have resulted in the death of more than 600 civilians, displacement of more than 1 million people, and widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure. Ongoing fighting and hostilities are further exacerbating the humanitarian situation and heightening risks to both civilians and peacekeepers. These developments are undermining the Lebanese government's bold steps, policy decisions, and serious commitment to peace and stability. We must not allow this. The Council must extend its full support to Lebanon. We urge all parties to adhere to their obligations under Security Council Resolution 1701 and the Cessation of Hostilities Agreement of November 2024. Full compliance with these commitments is essential to prevent further escalation and to restore stability in the region. In this context, we also call for full respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. And Pakistan stands firmly with the government and people of Lebanon. President, in the light of the evolving and deeply concerning situation in the region, we stress that further escalation must be avoided at all costs. We call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint. The ultimate objective must be urgent de-escalation, restraint, and a complete cessation of all hostilities and the peaceful resolution of all issues to prevent further deterioration of the regional security environment. This Council, we believe, must fully espouse and advance that objective. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Undersecretary Lacroix, Undersecretary Fletcher, and Assistant Secretary General Khiari for their informative and alarming briefings. We also thank France and Indonesia for calling this urgent meeting, which we agree is both necessary and timely. Recent days' events illustrate how fragile and dangerous the situation in Lebanon has become, and how crucial it is to prevent further escalation for the civilians of Lebanon and Israel alike. Mr. President, we condemn in the strongest possible terms the attacks on UNIFIL, which in the past 2 days have caused the deaths of 3 peacekeepers and the serious injuries of others. We look forward to the results of UNIFIL's full and thorough investigation into these incidents. Peacekeepers are clearly protected under international humanitarian law, and any deliberate targeting against peacekeepers is unacceptable. Denmark extends its deepest condolences to the families of those killed, as well as to the government and people of Indonesia. We wish a speedy recovery for those injured. The brave women and men of UNIFIL serve under the UN flag in the pursuit of peace. They are the embodiment of multilateral solidarity and cooperation in action, and these incidents represent a direct attack on these principles. We commend UNIFIL for its continuous work despite the extremely challenging circumstances and stress our unwavering support for the mission. Mr. President, as we've said before, we strongly condemn Hezbollah's continued attacks against Israel, which has dragged Lebanon into yet another unwanted war and must stop immediately. Denmark is concerned about the significant humanitarian and civilian consequences of Israel's military operations in Lebanon and underlines that all military actions must be conducted with full respect for international humanitarian law, including the principles of proportionality, distinction, and precaution. The protection of civilians must be ensured, and unimpeded passage of humanitarian relief must be facilitated. Recent statements by, for instance, the Israeli finance minister about the intention to move the Lebanese-Israeli border to the Litani River are deeply concerning. This area makes up 1/10 of Lebanon's territory, is home to hundreds of thousands of Lebanese, and includes cities with a rich and diverse cultural heritage. We strongly urge Israel to refrain from any large-scale ground invasion or long-term occupation of Lebanese territory that risk escalating to hostilities beyond control. This includes withdrawing its forces from occupied areas in Lebanon in line with the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. Denmark calls for respect for Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence in line with resolutions 1701 and 1559. Hezbollah must cease all attacks on Israel and respects the Lebanese state's exclusive authority over all arms and military activity. The Lebanese government has taken unprecedented steps in its efforts to disarm Hezbollah. We fully support the government's efforts in this regard. Mr. President, with reports of 1.1 million displaced in Lebanon, including over 350,000 children and more than 1,200 killed, including many civilians, the humanitarian situation is quickly reaching unmanageable levels. The majority of the displaced lack formal shelter, protection, food, and medical services. Humanitarian access to the south is significantly restricted for an estimated 150,000 people. Denmark condemns all attacks directed at civilians and civilian infrastructure, including first responders and healthcare personnel. Since March 2nd, we've seen 87 attacks on healthcare in Lebanon, resulting in more than 50 deaths among healthcare personnel and many more wounded. This must stop. Denmark recalls resolutions 2286 and 2730 on the protection of medical staff and facilities and the protection of humanitarian workers. We urge all parties to fully respect their obligations under international humanitarian law, uphold these resolutions, and ensure that all civilians, including medical staff and humanitarian workers, are protected and do not become the targets of attacks. Denmark also expresses our deep concern over the reported attacks on journalists and recall that civilians must be protected under international humanitarian law. Mr. President, in closing, as the situation in the region continues to escalate and the path to stability cannot be selective, but must be comprehensive. We must not allow developments in Lebanon to be overshadowed by other events. We must collectively and strongly insist on de-escalation. Around this table, we must do all within our power to this urgent end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, and my own country, Somalia. We thank USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and ASG Khiari for their comprehensive briefings. The A3 expresses its grave concern regarding the recent escalations of hostilities in southern Lebanon and joins the Secretary General in condemning the attacks against the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, which have resulted in the killing and injury of Indonesian peacekeepers. We extend our deepest condolences to the families of the victims, to Indonesia, and the troop contributing countries of the United Nations. We pay tribute to all peacekeepers who risk their lives in the service of international peace and security. Targeting United Nations peacekeepers is unacceptable and constitutes a serious violation of international law and relevant Security Council resolutions, including Resolution 1701. The safety and security of United Nations personnel and premises are not negotiable and must be respected at all times. Under no circumstances should peacekeepers be subject to any hostile acts, and those responsible for these attacks must be held accountable. Mr. President, the A3 is deeply concerned by the continued deterioration of the security situation along the Blue Line and the increasing toll on civilian populations, including civilian casualties, destruction of infrastructure, and large-scale displacement. We reiterate the urgent need to ensure the protection of civilians and full respect for international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The A3 reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity, and political unity of Lebanon. Lebanon must not become an arena for proxy confrontations or broader geopolitical tensions. Respect for the sovereignty of states and the principle of non-interference remain essential to preserving regional stability. Mr. President, the A3 calls on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and to refrain from actions that could further inflame tensions or destabilize the situation. We stress the importance of returning to the cessation of hostilities arrangements of 26 November of 2024 and ensuring that the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 as the primary framework for maintaining stability and preventing renewed conflict. Dialogue and diplomacy remain the only viable path to preventing further deterioration of the situation. We acknowledge the critical role played by UNIFIL in supporting stability, facilitating dialogue, and contributing to de-escalation along the Blue Line. The mission remains an essential instrument for confidence building and conflict prevention. We reiterate our full support for UNIFIL and express appreciation to troop contributing countries for their continued commitment. We also emphasize the importance of continued support to the Lebanese state institutions, including the Lebanese armed forces, to enable them to effectively assume their responsibilities in maintaining security and stability throughout Lebanese territory. To conclude, Mr. President, the A3 stands in solidarity with the people of Lebanon and reiterates its support for all efforts aimed at preserving stability, preventing regional spillover, and achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East in accordance with international law and the Charter of the United Nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Panama thanks you for convening this informative meeting and also for the information shared by the briefers this morning. USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix, ASG Khaled Kiari, and USG Tom Fletcher in their informative briefings to the Council that show that the situation in Lebanon continues to deteriorate in an alarming manner. We recognize the presence of the representatives of Lebanon, Israel, Indonesia, and Poland, who grace us with their presence this morning. 20 days have gone by already since the last meeting of this council, and far from seeing a de-escalation, the situation in Lebanese territory, including continuous bombings and fighting, has got significantly worse, with an increase in humanitarian consequences. Panama reiterates its condemnation of Hezbollah for the attacks and the irresponsible actions that have unleashed the current spiral of violence. In line with the most recent information from the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, since March 2nd, we have seen more than 3,900 incidents of hostilities, with at least 1,100 people killed, including tens of women and children, and more than 3,200 injured. More than 1 million people have been displaced, of which more than 136,000 are currently in collective shelters, while more than 189,000 have crossed to Syria. This shows the regional dimension of this crisis. Panama categorically rejects the attacks against the civilian population, as well as against civilian infrastructure, including health centres and medical personnel. And these continue to claim lives and to aggravate the suffering of the population. Mr. President, Panama condemns in the strongest terms the deaths of blue helmets from the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, following the attacks that occurred recently, including the explosion of a projectile on a UNIFIL position in the south of Lebanon, as well as the serious injuries suffered by members of the contingent that reflects the deterioration of the security conditions on the ground. Panama expresses its most sincere condolences to the families of the blue helmets who lost their lives, in particular to the Indonesia contingent, as well as to the state that they belong to. And we extend our full solidarity to UNIFIL personnel. This tragic incident is yet another on the list of recent incidents, including the one where 3 blue helmets from the Ghana contingent were injured. And this shows a concerning pattern of growing risks for peacekeeping personnel and constitute grave violations of international law, including international humanitarian law, of Resolution 1701, as well as of the fundamental norms that protect United Nations personnel and their inviolable character. It's essential for these occurrences to be investigated and for there to be accountability so that impunity does not provide cover for actions like this one in the present and in the future. As UNIFIL itself has stated, nobody should lose their life serving the cause of peace. Panama reaffirms its full support to the work of UNIFIL, whose presence remains essential to reduce tensions, to support the deployment of the Lebanese army, and to preserve the stability, across the Blue Line. Mr. President, Panama reiterates its firm support and its recognition of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity, and political independence of the Lebanese state and of its government and institutions, in particular the Lebanese armed forces, to strengthen the authority of the state across the whole of its territory and to be able to advance towards the principle that the monopoly over the legitimate use of force and arms lies exclusively with the state, and this in line with Resolution 1701. We reiterate, in light of this grave situation, an appeal to all parties to return to the cessation of hostilities agreement of the 26th of November 2024 and to fully comply with their obligations under international law. We urge seizing this opportunity to return to dialogue and negotiations, those offered by the Lebanese government to Israel. There is no military solution to this crisis. The full implementation of Resolution 1701 remains the fundamental framework that will guarantee stability across the Blue Line and allow us to move towards a lasting solution. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I thank USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and ASD Chiari for their briefings. And thank you for convening this emergency meeting at the request of France and Indonesia. I welcome the representative of Lebanon at today's meeting. Tensions in the Middle East are escalating and the spillover effects continue to spread. The rights and wrongs of the conflict in the Middle East are crystal clear. The pressing priority is to actively promote talks for peace, seize the opportunity for peace, and bring the conflict to an end. Since the situation between Lebanon and Israel escalated, hostilities have continued to intensify, resulting in severe casualties and destruction of infrastructure. The international community must take urgent action to put the brakes on the conflict before it spirals further out of control and to restore peace and stability in the region at an early date. I wish to make 3 points. First, achieving a ceasefire and cessation of hostilities is the most pressing task. The ongoing exchanges of fire between Israel and Hezbollah have plunged the people of the region into the suffering war. Israel's continuous escalation of military offensives has already killed over 1,200 people. The recent announcement by Israel to expand ground operations in Lebanon and extend the so-called buffer zone risks further prolonging and escalating the conflict, which is a cause for concern. Lebanon must not become another Gaza, and the international community must never allow the tragedy of Gaza to be repeated. China calls on the parties concerned to immediately cease hostilities and work to de-escalate the situation. Israel should immediately withdraw all its forces from Lebanon and respect Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Second, supporting Lebanon's domestic stability is of the utmost importance. The current situation has dealt a severe blow to the political, economic, and humanitarian situations in Lebanon. We welcome the efforts of the Lebanese government to strengthen governance over the country, and support parties in Lebanon in actively engaging in political dialogue to properly resolve differences. Under Israel's intense bombardment and large-scale forced evacuation orders, the humanitarian situation in Lebanon has rapidly deteriorated, with more than 1.2 million people forced to flee their homes and become displaced. The international community should step up emergency assistance to Lebanon and support the government in stabilizing domestic situation, ensuring basic livelihood, and alleviating humanitarian challenges. Third, the safety and security of UNIFIL is a bottom line that must not be challenged. Recently, UNIFIL's safety has been repeatedly affected by hostilities, including 2 deadly attacks that killed 3 peacekeepers and injuring many others. China strongly condemns the attacks against UNIFIL. We express deep condolences over the deaths of Indonesian peacekeepers who were killed in the attacks and heartfelt sympathies to the injured. Any deliberate attack on UN peacekeepers is a serious violation of international humanitarian law and Security Council Resolution 1701. Such attacks are absolutely unacceptable and must stop at once. We highly commend UNIFIL for remaining at their posts amid hostilities and urge the parties concerned to take concrete measures to ensure the safety and freedom of movement of UNIFIL, and to conduct serious investigations into and seek accountability for all attacks on peacekeepers. China respects the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Lebanon and stands ready to work with the international community to make unremitting efforts to help de-escalate tensions between Lebanon and Israel and restore peace and stability in Lebanon and the Middle East. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
President, we are grateful to USG Jean-Pierre Lacroix and Tom Fletcher, and also ASG Khaled Hirari for their comprehensive briefings on the situation in Lebanon, which we are very concerning also. The nigh on month of military escalation along the Blue Line and beyond is affecting not only our friends, the Lebanese people, but also peacekeepers of UNIFIL deployed in the south of the country. A clear and at the same time tragic confirmation of this is the death of 3 UNIFIL personnel in the last 48 hours and the injuring of several others. We express our sincere condolences to the families of the victims, and we wish a swift recovery to the injured peacekeepers. From what we can ascertain, according to comments from the leadership of the UN and UNIFIL, the investigation into what happened in the south of Lebanon is ongoing. We trust that the UN Secretariat will soon receive comprehensive information on this, including on who carried out this flagrant attack. Russia decisively condemns all attacks on UNIFIL troops, whoever the perpetrator was. We support the calls of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to parties to the conflict to comply with the norms of international law and guarantee the security of blue helmets. We strongly believe in the need for a swift ceasefire in the Lebanon-Israel border area. Otherwise, this heinous spike in violence in the south of Lebanon won't be the last fatal incident affecting UN staff. President. Another dangerous trend in recent days has been the deliberate targeting by the IDF of the media, reporting on the ground in the area of the Lebanese-Israel clashes. According to information we've received on the 28th of March as a result of a strike from an Israeli drone in the region of the Jezin, a famous journalist from the television channel Al Manar was killed, Ali Shuaib, and also his colleagues from Al Mayadin channel, Fatima and Mohammed Fatouni. Earlier on the 19th of March in the south of Lebanon, as a result of a missile attack by the Israeli Air Force, a camera crew from Russia Today were injured. The targeted strike was carried out directly close to where they were filming, where there were no military objects, which is clearly confirmed because the camera operator was able to film the detonation of the ammunition. We see this kind of action by Israel and its military to be a grave violation of international law and a deliberate hindrance to the work of the media. We demand a painstaking investigation into this incident by the Israeli authorities and for the perpetrators to be held accountable and for this kind of incident not to be allowed to happen again. President, we, like the majority of the people in this room, are very concerned about the intensification of hostilities of Israel in Lebanon, including daily exchange of fire and the consequences of this for both parties to the conflict, the destruction of critical civilian infrastructure. For the time while we are discussing the incident with UNIFIL, Israel has carried out a new powerful air strike in Beirut. I'd like to recall once again that the root cause of this escalation in the Lebanese-Israel confrontation is the aggression of Washington and West Jerusalem against Iran, which was the tripwire for a broader destruction of the fragile stability in the Middle East. Unfortunately, many members of the Security Council are stubbornly silent about this and continue to try to place all responsibility exclusively on the Lebanese pushback, presenting it as the main culprit for the spike of violence along the Blue Line. At the same time, they stay quiet about the many violations of Israel's regime of the ceasefire over the last year and a half. This one-sided approach by a host of states, including those directly involved in the current vast regional war, clearly is not helping normalize the situation in the region. On the contrary, it is spurring on warring parties to escalate the conflict. As a result, we are seeing a rising civilian death toll and large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure. In Lebanon alone, since the 2nd of March, as a result of IDF action, almost 1,500 people have died. The number of injured people is nearing 4,000, and more than 1 million Lebanese people have become IDPs. Israel's strikes on medicine facilities in Arab republics has become an everyday occurrence. Against this backdrop, we are hearing louder and louder militaristic rhetoric from Western Jerusalem, including orders from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to expand the so-called buffer zone in south of Lebanon, illegally under control of the IDF. President, we reaffirm our commitment of our country to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We call on the leadership of Israel to refrain from using purely military means to address their legitimate security concerns, to withdraw their army units from occupied territories, and to return to the path of diplomacy. A key benchmark for parties should remain to ensure that to fully honour their obligations under Security Council Resolution 1701 and other decisions of the Council, including those that provide the parameter for the activities of UNIFIL, which continue, despite threats to their security, they are remaining in their positions and paying with their lives to implement the UN mandate bestowed upon them to stabilize the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Señor presidente,
Mr. President, I thank the presidency for organizing this meeting and Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, Mr. Khalid Hiari, Assistant Secretary General for Middle East, and Mr. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you all for your briefings. President, the official reports and recent information confirm an alarming deterioration of the security and humanitarian situation in Lebanon. In our last statement, my delegation warned that the situation required an urgent international response in order to avoid precisely the situation that we're facing today. Against this backdrop,